Tides of Darkness, Pleasant Grove, Louisiana, autumn of 1998. Pleasant Grove, Louisiana was a beautiful, quaint little hamlet, just a few miles away from the Big Easy, New Orleans. But it was a very different environment in Pleasant Grove. Quiet, it's a little slice of Americana, a place where you could just raise your kids in peace and tranquility. Well, that peace and tranquility was going to be shattered on the night of Halloween. Well, Central High School, it was a typical Halloween morning as everybody was coming to the first period class. One local young man by the name of Will Dubois was getting his slides ready for his morning presentation while all the others were coming into class. One of his friends, Kyle LaSalle, the captain of the football team, and an all-around nice guy, very unusual for a high school jock, comes up to him tossing his football up and down, saying, "Hey, Will, so what's the presentation about today, man?" Will responds back, "Well, Kyle, it's about the old urban legend of my great grandfather and how he defeated the evil voodoo queen Miranda Duval." "Oh, that story against us, Kyle?" Will says, "Yeah, it's an interesting story, plus it's my ancestor. So what better Halloween project to do for today than this old story?" Kyle says, "Well, I guess." Then he goes on to say, "Well, I think it's going to be a better project than my History of the Jack-o'-lantern presentation." Well, the bell rings. Then their teacher, Mrs. Blake, comes in. She says, "All right, students, take your seat, take your seat. I hope you all have your presentations for Halloween ready." Then she says, "Mr. Dubois, you'll be the first one to do your presentation on the story of Miranda Duval." Well, Will says, "Thank you, Mrs. Blake," and he begins his slideshow. He turns on the machine and then moves to the first slide. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen of the class and Mrs. Blake, I trust you all know the old town urban legend of my ancestor, the late Reverend Gaston Dubois, and an evil voodoo queen by the name of Miranda Duval. Well, the story goes that in 1818, 180 years ago, an evil voodoo queen by the name of Miranda Duval made a pact with the devil for power. Well, this was in the early part of the year. Later that year, a few nights before Halloween, she made good on her pact, and legend has it that she opened the gateway to hell in this very town. Well, for 3 nights, the forces of hell roamed the town. Everything from evil spirits to the dead walking. And these were not normal dead people walking. These were the dead who were wicked, revived by the evil magic of the gateway to hell opening. Then he switches to the next slide. The next slide was the portrait of his ancestor, Reverend Gaston Dubois. And he goes on to say, "My ancestor, Gaston Dubois, was a Protestant minister in this town. And he fought the forces of evil, and he knew there was only one way and one way to stop it, and it was to take down the evil voodoo queen, Miranda." Well, legend has it that an epic battle between the two of them occurred, and my ancestor came out on top. And the gateway to hell was closed, and Miranda was defeated. Then he switches the slide. It was an old painting of the execution of Miranda, and he goes on to say, The next morning, the angry townspeople stormed her house, dragged her out, and lynched her by a tree in her house, and they set fire to her home. After her death, she was buried at the local cemetery where her grave still stands. Then, Will changes the slide. The next slide was the witch's house, Miranda's house. And he says, well, ladies and gentlemen, this is the house of the evil witch Miranda Duval, gloriously reconstructed to its original look. It's going to serve as the new home for the Museum of History. Then he switches the slide again. The next slide were the mannequins that were dressed in the actual clothing of both Reverend Dubois and the Witch Duval. And he says, this, ladies and gentlemen, is the nice dummies. One of them is my ancestor, and that's his actual clothing. And the other one is that of Miranda Duval. And that's supposed to be her clothes too. And these glorious dummies will be moving to their new home of the Museum of History. Right now, they reside in the old Museum of History in the town square, which for almost 50 years was our town museum, and now it's going to move to the newly built museum in the outskirts of town. Well, the presentation was over, and the class claps. Mrs. Blake says, well done, Will, well done. Very informative report. And then she goes on to say, okay, Kyle LaSalle, you're next. Well, later on that day, lunchtime, Kyle and Will were talking about the Halloween party. They were planning a big party, and they had a problem finding a location, but they had decided on the perfect location. It was going to be at the new museum. It's fully built, it's got electricity, but it's not open yet. Perfect place to have a big Halloween party. Well, as they were talking, suddenly two of their other friends come up, a young teenage black couple, Carl Bowers and Niecy Phillips. Carl says, yo's a homie, what's a happening? Kyle says, not much. We've got the party location down, but now we're trying to get the final stuff together for tonight. Niecy says, oh my god, I can't wait. I got my new costume ready and everything. And I got a date with my man over here. Carl's like, oh shucks, Niecy. Don't, announce it. I mean, there's going to be a lot of fine honeys in this party tonight. Suddenly, Niecy gets mad and slaps Carl behind his head. She says, boy, you better not be talking like that, or else you're going to be in deep trouble with me. Carl's like, oh, I'm just joking around, babe. I'm just joking around. I don't want to be with any other woman but you. She says, that's better. Well, then another of their friend came. Her name was Amanda Hansen. She was a school cheerleader and Will's crush. She says, oh, hey guys, I just come to ask you, is the party location settled? Will says, yeah, it is, with a nervousness and stammer towards her. And, do you need a date tonight for the party? She responds back, the party's still a big question mark for me. I have my baby brother home tonight, and I have to babysit. If I can't get anybody else to look after him, then I'm going to have to miss the party. Will was like, oh, that's too bad. Then she says, well, I have to go. I'll see you guys later. Well, after she left, Carl was like, ooh, shot down again. And suddenly, he gets smacked in the back of the head by Niecy again for that. She says, boy, you don't be making fun of your homeboy for getting rejected. Carl's like, you're right, I'm sorry. Will, besides, there's going to be some fine honeys in that party tonight. I can guarantee you. If I wasn't with my girl over here, I would have been all over them. Well, the two guys laughed. Then Kyle says, well, before we go to the party tonight, I'm going to need you guys' help. I still haven't got my costume yet, and I know the perfect place where I can get the costume, but I'm going to need help. Later that afternoon, the gang were across the street from the old history museum and the town square. Kyle says to the group, all right, guys and girl, This is where I need to get my costume. I'm going to borrow the costume of Will's illustrious ancestor. It'll be perfect Halloween costume for the party, and then after the party's over tomorrow morning, we'll return it right to the museum. Will's like, I don't think this is a good idea, Kyle. Your dad is one of the meanest judges in this town. Nisi said, yeah, Will's telling the truth. And Carl's like, yeah, dude, no, your dad will throw us all in jail. He doesn't care if you're his son. He'll probably throw you in jail with us too. Kyle's like, guys, listen, my dad may be a lot of things: a hanging judge, an asshole, a jerk, and a guy you just don't want to get on his bad side on most days. But, as long as I return the costume back to the original place, I'll be fine. Will's like, okay, it's your funeral. Suddenly, a truck pulls up. It was a newer model F-150, and the kids recognized whose truck that was. It was none other than Jimmy Richardson's truck, a local man who thinks he's a big shot. Well, there were two big dogs on the back of the truck. Richardson steps out of the truck and he gives his dog a treat. And he had his rifle with him. Carl's like, oh, great. I bet you Sheriff Davis is paying Richardson tonight to keep an eye out in the town. Kyle's like, you're probably right. There's got to be another way into the museum. Will says, I know another way into the museum. So the gang sneak around and they get into the museum through the back way. As they opened the window and made their way into the museum, most of the museum was packed up, as the main floors were all littered with boxes and crates. The only thing that was still not packed up yet was the mannequin mock-up of Gaston Dubois. Kyle goes over and starts taking off the costume from the mannequin while the others were helping him. Well, Will noticed something over in the corner. It was an old chest. With his curiosity getting the better of him, Will walks over to the chest and he opens the chest. The chest was rather empty, except for 3 items in there. There was some sort of ceremonial dagger, a rolled up scroll, and a red ruby ring that had some sort of occultic symbol on it. The others had noticed Will's discovery, and Kyle says, hey, Will, what is that? Will says, I don't know. It is a chest, and these were the only 3 objects in there. He says, as he was showing the others the ruby ring, that symbol, I've seen it somewhere, but I can't place my finger on it right now. This scroll, I don't know what's in here, but it's sealed with wax, and this is some sort of ceremonial dagger. Nisi said, then maybe it belongs to the witch Miranda. Carl's like, whoa, if that belongs to that witch, you better put that thing back in there. There's no telling what that thing can do. Kyle says, oh, come on, guys. Don't be chicken. There's no such thing as magic. He grabs the scroll out of Will's hand. Then he broke the wax seal and unrolled the scroll. It had symbols of voodoo in there and some sort of spell in French Creole. The gang looked at it. Then Nisi had the brilliant idea and said, hey, I got an idea, guys. Let's go out to the cemetery and let's read this thing just for Halloween fun. Carl's like, Nisi, woman, what the Sam hell you want to do that for? She angrily says at Carl, oh, Carl, shut up. This is just play. Come on, she says, guys, let's go out and read this thing in the cemetery. Will's like, I don't know. I don't believe in magic either, but something's telling me not to play around with this stuff. Kyle's like, oh, come on, Will. Don't be chicken shit. Let's do what Nisi says. Let's just go out in the cemetery and read this for Halloween fun. Later, at the local cemetery of Pleasant Grove, it was a typical cemetery, a cemetery full of all the dead from the founding of the town to the present. It was big, it was ornate, and it was one of the few cemeteries that you could bury your dead below ground because it's swampy area. Well, at the cemetery, they were near the above ground crypt of the infamous Miranda Duval. Will looked at her plaque and read what the plaque on her crypt said. It said, Miranda Duval, born March 1780, Santo Domingue, died Pleasant Grove, November 1st, 1818. And it said beneath it, Voodoo Queen of Pleasant Grove. Well, there was also another grave near hers. It had graffiti on it, and it said Killer Monster. It was the grave of an infamous serial killer, Boyd Johnson. Kyle had taken notice of Boyd Johnson's grave, and he says, man, oh man, there it is, the grave of Boyd Johnson. Carl's like, Boyd Johnson, you mean the serial killer who murdered all those people? Kyle was saying, yes, that very same Boyd Johnson. That man that my father rightfully sent to the electric chair years ago. Niecy looks at the vandalized grave of Boyd Johnson, and she said, oh, I heard all the horror stories he did. That's the one good thing your dad did, Niecy says to Kyle. Kyle says, I do agree with you all on that. Well, anyways, he says, let's get started. He says, Niecy, would you do the honor of reading the scroll since you're the one that knows somewhat how to read French Creole? She says, okay, it may not be perfect, but I'll give it a crack. So Niecy grabs the scroll and begins reading aloud the spell in the scroll, which was written in Creole. Cham suf sapan an nan la vie en l'anmo onwe u nan fe. Suddenly, nothing happened. Everything was normal. The sun had begun to set. So Kyle says, come on everybody, let's go. We got to get ready for the party. So the gang ran out of the cemetery shouting and screaming. They all piled into Kyle's convertible and they ride off into the sunset. Well, shortly after they left, and shortly after the sun had set, suddenly a violent quake happened right in the cemetery. The earthquake was over, but it damaged the cemetery badly. A lot of the above-ground crypts were cracked open and partially collapsed, and a lot of the gravestones were knocked over, and there were huge cracks and fissures in the ground. But that was the least of the problem. Soon, zombies, molding, decaying zombies, were coming out of their graves. All of them rising up from the spell, and from the very cracked above-ground crypt of Miranda Duval, a green vapor was coming out. Soon the vapor had formed into Miranda. She was back, wearing the clothes that she was executed in. She was looking around her surroundings as the zombies were coming out of their graves. She lets out a sinister smile and slowly walks off. As for the zombies that were rising, they too were beginning to walk off towards the town. Well, later that night, in the town, it was your typical Halloween night as everybody was having fun. The kids were running around trick-or-treating with their adult chaperones walking around, talking to each other, probably a mother or two running to each other and doing brief conversations as their kids were running around having fun. Then there was Jimmy Richardson playing guard for the night of the town on the orders of Sheriff Davis. He was just walking around. His dogs were with him. They were so well trained they didn't have to be on the leash. Well, as Richardson was walking around brandishing that giant rifle of his, all of a sudden he felt something come over him. He felt some sort of change coming over his body. You could hear the sounds of bone crunching in him. Richardson was starting to change physically. Even his dogs began barking at him. He was in agony. He was in pain. He was starting to get hairier and hairier. Soon he began sprouting a snout, growing physically in size till he was tearing off his clothes from the growth. Then he became a full werewolf and let out a loud howl. After his transformation and howling, his big dogs ran off in terror the opposite direction. Meanwhile, in Will's house, well, he had the house to himself. His parents left early to a Halloween party several towns over, so he was pretty much alone. He was getting ready as he was putting on his Halloween costume. He decided this year to dress as a historical figure. He was dressing up as the famed Matthew Hopkins, the famous witch-finder general of England. And the stuff he took from the trunk, the ceremonial dagger and the ring, was accessorizing his costume. After he had finished dressing up, all of a sudden he was confronted with a bizarre light, a weird noise, and a scary-looking apparition that had materialized before him. Of course, Will freaked out. A ghost manifested in front of him, and to top it off, he recognized that ghost. It was the ghost of his ancestor, Gaston de Bois, who said,
"William, an evil has escaped. The witch Miranda returns. You must stop her before midnight tonight."
And as quick as this thing happened, it stopped. The ghost disappeared. Will was freaked out. I was like, what the same hell's going on here? And it dawned on his mind, oh, that stupid scroll. Oh, great. Oh, great. What did he mean? Evil. Midnight tonight. Oh, no. It dawned on Will's mind. Maybe something happened. Maybe something happened after they left the cemetery. Oh, crap. Will then storms out of the house. He goes to the garage, gets into his mom's rather brand new Mercury Regal GS, opens the garage door, starts up the car, and drives out of the driveway. Well, the zombies were coming into town. Since it was Halloween, nobody noticed anything. They thought it was just part of the festivities. Even one of the teenagers that were out there on their way to the party is like, man, look at those costumes. They look like real rotting corpses. That's cool. Meanwhile, at Kyle's house, it was not such a peachy Halloween night, as his dad, who was already drunk, was berating him for the costume theft. He says, screaming to his son, "God damn it, boy. You think I'm going to protect you? No. You get caught, I'm going to make sure you go to jail. Don't think because you're my son, I'm going to show you special favor, boy. And I'm going to make sure you get the full book of the law thrown at you." Then Kyle responds back angrily to his dad, "You know what, Dad? God damn you, man. God damn you. I'm going to return this costume in the morning. I'm just merely borrowing it." During the heated argument, Will's mom was just crocheting away, just mentally losing herself in her work, trying to block out the violent argument between her husband and her son. Kyle leaves the house angry and gets into his car and drives away. Then his dad goes on a drunken tirade. "Goddamn kids, goddamn generation, they're no goddamn good. I tell you, they're no goddamn good." Then when his dad goes into the kitchen to get more booze, suddenly he sees the garbage fill and it's like, "God damn, that boy forgot to take out the garbage. No good kids. I didn't know why I had kids in the first place." Then he grabs the garbage and walks out. As he walks out, he goes by his crocheting wife and says, "This is your fault. You wanted to have children. I told you it was a bad idea. You and your dumb ideas, worthless bitch." And he walks out of the house into the night with the garbage. As he walked over to the garbage can, all of a sudden, something hideous leaps out at him that was hiding behind the garbage cans. The old judge fell back on the ground, and what was hiding behind the garbage can was scary. It was the zombie of none other than Boyd Johnson, the serial killer he sent to the chair years ago. The judge lets out a shrill scream as the zombie said with a whisper, Guilty. And then lunged right onto the judge and began attacking him, killing him. While the attack on the judge was occurring at the same time, in the other part of town, Will was driving in his mom's car as fast as he could to the party when all of a sudden he saw a familiar figure walking. It was his crush, Amanda Hansen. She was dressed like a 1950s cheerleader. Will slows down the car and pulls over. He puts the car on park and he gets out and he says, "Hey Amanda, what are you doing out here?" Amanda says, "I was on my way to the party. I was able to free myself from my baby brother early, but then my freaking car broke down. I tried to call home," she says to Will, "but nobody's answering, so I decided to make back on foot. I really wanted to go to that party." Will says, "Well, I'm on my way to the party. You want to ride?" She let out a smile and says, "Sure." And then she gets into the passenger seat, and Will gets back into the car, and they drive off. While on their way to the party, Will wanted to explain to Amanda everything that was happening, but he figured that she wouldn't believe him, so he decided to keep it to himself. In the back of his mind, he was hoping that maybe it was just a hallucination, maybe someone playing a prank on him, that this was not real. Well, but he had to be prepared, so he kept on driving, but he was not driving as fast. He didn't want to scare Amanda. Well, at the party, it was a huge party. Half of the high school was there. And Nisi and Carl were there, and they were wondering what the heck happened to their friends and was keeping them. Nisi was wearing a Supergirl costume. Instead, the S said Super Babe. And of course, she was also berating her boyfriend Carl for wearing what she considered the most laziest costume ever. He said he was an FBI agent. All he had was a black t-shirt that said FBI in white and purple sweatpants. Well, the party was going great. Everybody was having a good time. Everybody's wearing an assortment of costumes. Then Kyle arrives. Carl quickly runs down the stairs and says, "Man, what kept you, Kyle? Dude, man, people got here hours ago." Kyle says, "Sorry, trouble with the old man. He's drunk as hell again. Anyways, is Will here?" Carl says, "No, he's not. I phoned his house, but he wasn't there." Then Nisi walks up to the two of them, and she berates Kyle and says, "Well, it's about time you got here. What the hell kept you?" Kyle repeated what he told her boyfriend. Then she says, "Well, I have to go out back and get more kegs. We're going through these kegs like no tomorrow." Soon, Nisi was at the back of the house/museum where they kept a lot of kegs for the party at. So she went to grab one keg. It was a little challenging. Kegs are kind of heavy. Suddenly, she was startled by a woman. But unbeknownst to Nisi, this was not any ordinary woman. It was the resurrected Miranda Duval. She was wearing a long blue period dress, a yellow red-lined cloak, like a shawl, and her hair was wrapped up in red linen. Well, Nisi's like, oh, you scared me. Do you go to our school?" she asked, puzzled. The woman stared at her and said a frank no with a bit of an accent. Then Nisi asked her, "Do you go to any of the other high schools around here?" The woman says to Nisi, "Do I look like I go to school?" Nisi was like, "Okay, no. That we don't care as long as you can enjoy the party and don't cause trouble," she says. Then Nisi compliments the woman and she says, "You look exactly like Miranda Duval. It's like the painting come to life." Miranda lets out a big smile and she says, "Thank you." And then she asks Nisi, "What's your name, child?" Nisi responds with a giggle because of the accent. "Yes, my name is Nisi." Then she goes on to say, "Me and my boyfriend and our friends are throwing this big Halloween party here at the former home of Miranda Duval. They recently rebuilt it and they're going to turn it into the new history museum." Nisi was explaining to Miranda. Unbeknownst, it was the real Miranda. Miranda looked around. She says, "Oh, this is very nice. It's the least thing they could do after they killed me." Nisi giggled very uncomfortably. She says, "Wow, you really put on a great act, lady. Are you an actress or something?" Miranda says, "No, I'm no actress. But this is real," she says. Suddenly, Miranda exposes her fangs to Nisi. She came back as a vampire. Then she draws out her cape and attacks Nisi. She wraps her arms tightly around Nisi and plunges her fangs right into Nisi's carotid arteries, draining her blood and killing her. Meanwhile, at the party, it was a usual party as everybody was enjoying themselves. Carl and Kyle were laughing and joking. They noticed some rather unusual looking people at the party. Carl's like, "Wow, look at those costumes, man." Kyle says, "You're right, Carl, look at that, man. They look like rotting zombies. That's pretty cool." Well, as the party progressed, those real zombies are in the party began attacking the party guests. Soon a panic ensued as more and more zombies showed up and began attacking the party guests, biting them, tearing their flesh apart. Kyle says with a panic to Carl, "What, dude? Why are they attacking the people?" Carl's like, "I don't know." Suddenly, it dawned on Carl. "Oh, dude. Oh, shit. Kyle. I bet you that stupid spell that Nisi read in the graveyard worked. Probably something happened after we left. Oh, damn, the dead have come back to life and attack. The curse is true. The stories are true, man. Oh, shit, we're in deep trouble. How are we going to stop this?" Carl asked Kyle in a frenzy. Kyle says, "I don't know. Oh, God. You know what? Where's Will? Will knows these things. Will probably would figure it out. We gotta find Will." Carl and Kyle began to run, but then it dawned on Carl. Carl's like, "Oh no, I can't. I can't leave Nisi here with these monsters. I gotta go save her." Kyle screams at Carl, "No, Carl, don't!" But too late. His pleas fell on deaf ears as Carl ran back the opposite direction. He was running upstairs to save Nisi, but as soon as he got into the room where Nisi was at, suddenly he noticed Nisi was just standing there staring at him. She looked different. Her skin was discolored, but he was too frantic and too worried to take complete notice, and he says, "Oh God, Nisi, you're safe." He runs over to hug her. "I'm here, baby. I'm here to protect you." Well, then Nisi opens her mouth, exposing her fangs, and lunges her teeth right at Carl's carotid arteries. Meanwhile, back downstairs, Kyle fights his way through the horde of the undead to make his way out to the front yard. Suddenly, as he gets out in the front yard, a pair of bright headlights shine on him, and he sees it was from a car coming up high speed. Suddenly, the car comes to a fast stop. Will sticks his head out of the driver's side and screams at Kyle. "Kyle, what are you waiting for, man? Quick, get into the back seat. We have no time to lose." Kyle shouts back, "You don't have to tell me twice." As he's running towards the Buick, he gets into the rear door and quickly slams it shut. Then Will puts the car in reverse. As he's putting the car in reverse, he runs over two zombies. He does a spin, puts the car in drive, and then they speed off into the darkened road. Inside the car, Will asks Kyle, "Kyle, are you okay, man?" Kyle's like, "Yeah, what the hell, man? What the hell? Was that the work of the spell from that scroll?" Asks Kyle. Will responds back, "Yes." Then Will asks Kyle, "Kyle, what about Carl and Nisi?" Kyle says, "Forget about them. Those two are dead." Amanda says, "Oh no, what's going on here? Since we've been coming over to the house, all I see is zombies and hearing radio reports of the town being invaded by zombies and other monsters have been sighted. Would someone please tell me what's going on here? What about this scroll business?" Well, Will decided to give Amanda the long overdue explanation. He pretty much recounted what happened, and Kyle backed up everything that Will was saying. Kyle asks Will, "What next, man? You're the expert on this stuff. What do we do?" Will responds back, "Well, I have a theory on how to stop this, but we have to go back to my house and get the scroll, plus there's some weapons in my house, a couple guns, maybe a few handguns, because my dad keeps the bigger stuff like the rifles locked up. Kyle says, "That's a good idea, man. That's a good idea." But what about Amanda here? Kyle asks Will. Will says maybe we have to get her to safety first because this is our doing and it's up to us to stop it. Then Amanda asks Will, "Well, then where are you going to drop me off to, genius? I don't think there's a safe place in town." Will's like, "I don't know. I'm sure we'll find a safe place on our way to my house." Suddenly, the radio starts broadcasting news on where to take refuge at.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to WKLX News 103.1. For those of you who are tuning in the midst of this bizarre phenomenon, Sheriff Davis has released a statement saying he does not understand what's going on, and he's urging all residents to lock your doors and do not call 911, for all the deputies have been pulled off the street and emergency responders have been ordered to stay indoors. Meanwhile, we're getting unconfirmed reports of ghost sightings. Since this phenomenon had begun around 6 o'clock this evening, there have been sightings, confirmed sightings of zombies, a couple confirmed sightings of a werewolf and a vampire. But there are now unconfirmed reports of ghosts walking around and several other weird creatures that have been reported.
Then the radio announcer had announced of a new report that just came in detailing what to do for those who are out on the streets.
This just in. Sheriff Davis is ordering anybody that was caught out on the street when this phenomenon broke out to please seek refuge at the sheriff's station, any of the substations, or at the fire department. He says there are deputies in these stations and the fire department, well armed, and there's also food and water. He is also urging anybody who are in their vehicles to please get the hell out of town and don't look back.
Will says, "Well, that settles it. Amanda, we're dropping you off at the sheriff's headquarters, and once you're safe, we're going to stop this ourselves." Amanda says to Will, "Be careful, Will," and she also turns to the back seat and says to Kyle, "Kyle, you too, be careful. I want to see you both in school tomorrow," she says. Will lets out a smile and is like, "Don't worry, Amanda. You'll see us both in school tomorrow." Well, they pull up to the sheriff's headquarters. Sure enough, there was way too many zombies out in the front. And Will says, "Forget it, Amanda. It's not safe." And he floors it, speeding off. They finally arrived to Will's house. And during the drive to Will's house, they ran over several zombies. The neighborhood was scaredly quiet as they pulled right up to the front door of Will's house. They get out, but they could hear in the background the distant sound of gunfire as people were defending their homes against the horde of undead that were attacking. The teens made it inside Will's house, but it was eerily quiet. Well, Will was able to get the pistols. He got a .44 Magnum and two .38s. Kyle took the .44 Magnum, and he's like, "Alright, I'm going to be like Dirty Harry." He gave the other .38 to Amanda. Amanda says, "I haven't shot a gun before." Will says, "It's easy, Amanda. You just point and shoot. That's it." Then they retrieve other items to help them fight the undead. An aluminum baseball bat for Kyle, a wooden baseball bat for Amanda, and Will decided to take the axe. Well, he goes up to the study and grabs the scroll, but then all of a sudden he was seized by Miranda. Miranda had him in the headlock. Since she was a vampire, she was naturally stronger than an average human. As Will struggled to break himself free from the headlock, Miranda says to him, "Don't struggle, boy. It's going to make it worse. After all these years, I'm going to get my revenge on a Dubois." And she screams, "Gaston! Gaston, I know you're here. I can feel your presence. Watch as I turn your great-great-great-great-grandson into a vampire." She then forces Will's head to the side, exposing his neck. She goes down to his neck to place the bite as bloody saliva starts drooling onto his neck. He struggles and squirms. No, no. Ugh. But then at the last second, he was saved by Amanda, who ran in the room and hit a home run with Miranda's head. Now that Will was free, they all ran outside. Well, as soon as they ran outside, suddenly there was a werewolf on the car. But Kyle quickly pulled the .44 out and shot the werewolf. Well, the shot hit the werewolf right in between the eyes, sending the werewolf flying back. As the teens made it to the car, suddenly Amanda was seized by Miranda. And Miranda was about to put the bite on Amanda, but Amanda reached in for a shirt, pulled out her necklace that had a cross on it, and she shoved it right into Miranda's face, and as a sizzling sound is heard, Miranda backs away, letting go of Amanda, leaving a big burnt crucifix mark on her cheek. They all get into the car and speed off. As Will was driving high speed, Kyle asked Will, "So what's next? What do we do now?" Suddenly, in the other part of the back seat, the ghost of Gaston Dubois materializes, scaring both Amanda and Kyle. He goes on to explain to Will what must be done.
William, now that you have the scroll, listen to my directions carefully. You must go to the cemetery, roll up the scroll tightly, use the ring to hold it rolled up, and with the ceremonial dagger, just cut your hand and rub the blood all over the scroll. But you must do this action before midnight tonight. If you do not make it to midnight, then the evil will spread and forever walk the earth. Hear my warning. Accomplish this. I will help as much as I can.
The ghost of Gaston finally disappeared from the back seat after giving his instructions and his warning. They arrived later on to the cemetery, and time was running out. It was already 11:50. Well, they noticed the cemetery was in ruins. It looked like an earthquake hit it, but they figured it was from the spell and the dead rising. Well, they arrived to the gravesite of Miranda Duval. It was eerily quiet, too quiet for comfort. Will proceeds to roll up the scroll very tightly, and he puts the ring on it to hold it. Well, as he was about to cut his right hand and slather blood on the scroll, suddenly the zombies show up and Miranda attacks Will while the zombies attack Kyle and Amanda. They fend off the zombies as best as they can with their guns, and they soon run out of ammo, and they take off running the opposite direction. As Miranda was throwing Will around like a rag doll, she was taunting him. "Forget it, boy. You're not going to succeed. You're not going to stop me." Then she kneels down to Will and tears his shirt collar, exposing his neck. She was about to bite him when all of a sudden the spirit of Gaston materializes. He reaches out with his hands, and from his hands emanate bright light like sunlight, burning the vampiress. She leaps off of Will, screaming as her skin was sizzling from the sunlight that was emanating from the ghost's hand. Then he stops and he looks at Will, and Will looks back at him, and he vanishes. Will runs back to her gravesite. Then he completes the rite. There was only 2 minutes left. It was already 11:58. He cuts his hand. Then he rubs the blood on the scroll. Suddenly, a bright light emanates from the scroll and consumes the entire cemetery and the entire town. Suddenly, it was quiet. Too quiet. The zombies were gone. Miranda was gone. The cemetery's back to normal, like nothing happened. Then Will hears the distant chime of the town clock chiming midnight. Then Will sees Kyle and Amanda run up to him. Amanda asks Will, "Did you succeed?" Will said, "Yes, I did. Look, everything's back to normal, like nothing's happened." Kyle says, "All right, man." And then they high-five each other, and Amanda hugs both of the guys. Amanda asks Will, "So, what are you going to do with the scroll?" Will says, "I'm going to burn this thing. It's not going to fall into anybody else's hands ever again." Kyle says, "That's a good idea." Will says, "Alright, everybody, let's go. I want to go home. Let's see if everything's truly back to normal." Well, the teens get into the Buick and they drive off into the quiet, normal looking night. Like and subscribe. The end.